Welcome everybody again. Before we get started, I just wanted to remind all attendees that if you want to join the conversation today on social media, on LinkedIn or Twitter, to please use one of these hashtags, TE virtual events or hashtag TEVE. Another way that you can participate is to use the chat feature in Zoom to let us know who you are and where you're joining us from. You can also let us know what you're hoping to learn from today's event. That's awesome. So I am going to stop sharing and introduce our guest speaker today. On the Zoom meeting with me, I've got my friend and amazing human, Jazz Conboy, who's General Counsel at the New York State Council for School Superintendents. Jazz, welcome.
Thanks, Rita. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I'm super excited to be here.
Great. Yeah, so Jazz, I've known you for a couple of years, and I am absolutely in awe and honored to, by everything I know about you. Your work is amazing, how you've brought together leaders in New York, and I understand you're recognized nationally for some of the work you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Rita.
It'd be great to learn a little bit more about you. So why don't you tell the audience about who you are, the organization you work for, those kind of details so we can get a sense and set the stage for the conversation we're going to have today.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the General Counsel at the New York State Council of School Superintendents. That basically just means I'm the lead attorney, and we are a membership association in New York for school superintendents and school administrators at the cabinet or assistant superintendent level. We have, I think, over 800 members in New York. And I do a variety of things, including negotiating superintendents' contracts. And I do a whole host of professional development programs, and I speak at a number of our programs. One of my big passions is our women's initiative. So that's a leadership conference that we run around the state to get more women into leadership positions in education. I also speak to all of our members on a variety of different issues, from connection and loneliness at the top, and legal ethics and contract negotiations, and a variety of different things like that. So good fun, busy work, a little bit of travel, but doing good work for educators in New York.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And, you know, when we were talking last, you were telling me about how you were hearing from leaders kind of in isolation about some of the challenges they were having in their day-to-day work, or some of the organizational problems they're all kind of facing, and how you saw an opportunity to start to bring people together to have conversations. You want to tell the audience a little bit more about some of the work you've been doing to create a sense of community for superintendents and cabinet leaders?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the statistics I've used and rely on come from the corporate world, and a new study just came out last week, which said that over 61% of individuals right now in the United States are experiencing loneliness. And you know, that percentage sits around CEOs as well, around 60%. So I think it's a huge issue and challenge that we see that our members are facing. So we're always trying to do activities that bring our members together, that get them to connect with each other, build their networking, those kinds of things, so that they don't feel so all alone. It's interesting, in my position, the unique position I have, I often have superintendents who will call me and say, hey, Jazz, I bet you've never, no one's ever called you with this issue. You've never heard of this issue before. And my response is usually, well, actually, I had 3 people who called me about that issue last week. I'm so glad you called me. I'll be glad to talk you through it. Or sometimes I'll get, hey, Jazz, you know, you're the only person I can talk to about this. And I think, great, I'm so glad I'm here, that they trust me, that they're willing to talk to me. But at the same time, I feel like I see that disconnect and that loneliness if they're saying the only person they have to rely on or talk to is their attorney. And so they're missing that connection with their colleagues and being able to talk through some of the issues. Because really, at the end of the day, they're all facing the same issues and challenges. They just don't really know it or recognize it or have spaces within where, where they can talk about it.
Mm-hmm. And so why is it important for you, or important to create that space for people? What are we hoping to achieve?
Yeah, because I think, listen, if we can be more connected, eliminate that loneliness, people are happier, they share ideas, better thoughts, different approaches and diverse approaches to solving problems and challenges, and just makes them better leaders.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you were mentioning at the beginning some of the pieces of work that you've been contributing a lot to around new leadership development, and also the work you've done in the Women's Initiative and Women Leading. Do you want to talk a little bit more about either of those? I know you've used ThoughtExchange in both those spaces. So
yeah. So with our Women's Leadership Program in New York State, we have about 77% of your professional staff are women.
Okay.
Yet in New York, only about 30% make it to the top. And nationally, I think that number sits around 18%. So nationally, you have only about 18% of superintendents are women. So we've run professional development programs all over the state. I'm actually speaking at the national conference at AASA on Women's Initiative and trying to get more women into leadership positions. And so at those regional programs, as part of our professional development, we've used ThoughtExchange. And again, it's been a great way to show people that they're not alone, that they're facing some of the same issues. So a common question that we may ask is, what are some of the issues that women leaders face that we all know exist, but that nobody really talks about?
Ooh, I love it.
So yeah, so what ThoughtExchange does is it creates a confidential, safe space for people to put those thoughts up and respond, and it almost instantly creates this sense of community. You can almost see it happening in the room because people are like, oh yeah, like that, I know exactly what you're talking about. And we see common themes every time we do it, and it instantly makes people feel like, hey, I'm not the only one experiencing this issue or that issue or feeling this way. And it allows us to have a really rich conversation about what the participants identify that they want to talk about, and they know that it's safe because there's so many other people who have rated it high that they're experiencing the same thing and they want to have conversation around the same issues. So it's been a really, really powerful tool to drive the conversation and to get people connected.
That's awesome. It's like you're breaking down some of the, some of those walls around these vulnerable topics and making a place for people to just start having conversations.
Exactly. Yeah, it's been really powerful, really great.
Yeah, I really like that. So tell me, when you're running the thought exchanges, it sounds like you're doing them mostly live in the room during like a learning session or something. Do you want to tell the audience a bit more about how you usually do that?
So we've done it both ways. So we've put it out in advance when we have a registration list. We've put it out in advance, and then people can respond in advance and have time to think and process and look at the responses. And then we've also done it live in the room where people just populate their answers right there on the spot.
Yeah, that's awesome. So yeah, let's going back to the breakout sessions where you have people talking about, those things that are hard to talk about and not talked about often, and you can see that collective appreciation in the room. What are some of the outcomes that you're seeing from this work, or how do you know that it's adding value to what you're doing?
Well, we see people also, like I said, it builds that connection. So we see people instantly like building their network. So you're having great conversation, connecting with people that maybe they wouldn't have necessarily interacted with at the conference, but the conversation from ThoughtExchange is creating those groups and driving those people to common themes. So they're instantly connecting, exchanging information, finding people that are, common-minded, or even some people who have opposing thoughts, but it allows them to think differently, to connect, and really build out their network. So that's been it's one of those unintended consequences that have been so great and so strong. And, the feedback that we get is, we wish we had more time to do this. And so every time we're running a program, we're building in more and more time to focus in on the thoughts that people are putting into ThoughtExchange, the conversations they're having. And then one additional piece, which has been really great as well, is we're then, after the fact, looking at the results.
Right.
And we're saying, okay, like maybe it was work-life balance was really high in the ThoughtExchange. We should do a whole session next time, devote an hour, hour and a half to work-life balance in our next program. So it's driving the content that people want to hear about, and then drilling down and focusing more in on that. So that's been really great for us from a professional development standpoint as well, and planning future programs.
Yeah, I really like that. And I look back through all the different exchanges I've seen you do. A lot of them are that trying to crowdsource what people most want to know about, or what information do you most need to do your job at your best. So that is wonderful to hear that is working out. And yeah, that's awesome. So any surprises in the conversations you've been having around women in leadership? Like, were there any themes emerging that you were surprised were coming up, or just maybe tell us a little bit about the types of thoughts that people are talking about?
Yeah, so we're like right in between 5 and 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like second nature to me. So I'm not surprised.
Yeah, you're used to it all.
Right, because I feel like I live and breathe it. So it's hard for me to think about things that are surprising. I think some of those really positive unintended consequences that we didn't expect when we first started using ThoughtExchange have been some of the most valuable things, that we've come up with. We've also used it in just generally with our superintendents groups. One of the common questions that we'll ask is, how do you effectively communicate with staff, board members, stakeholders, community, students? The results in there to see the unique ways people are communicating with their communities and having effective communications. That's been also a really powerful way to have some conversations around the table about how are we communicating, what's the most effective way to communicate, like how do we get through to and reach people that we maybe might not reach. So that's been a really great way that we've used it as well. And then we have superintendents who are, sharing some really creative ideas over how they're communicating and getting their message out. Yeah,
that's awesome. So kind of like going some group learning.
Yep.
And being open to hear some new ideas and some new perspectives.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I saw in some of the work you've done, you've asked about, communication with your board, which can be a tricky topic for people too. Yeah, that's awesome. So I think, there's just been so many points I want to enter in with you around the work you've done. I know we don't have a lot of time to go into all of the examples today. Just wondering, is there anything else you want to add about the work you do to support women leaders, the new and developing leadership and cabinet, It's not necessarily thought exchange focus. It's just like how you're showing up and adding value to the people you work with in New York and nationally.
Yeah, I think with women leaders, you know, we call it our women's initiative, but really, especially in New York, when over 70% of our superintendents are men, you know, we run these conferences and we equally are targeting men and women to attend our conferences. I have a simple statistic that I will share with people. It's an old Hewlett-Packard study that says that men will apply for a job when they meet 60% of the qualifications, and women will apply for a job when they meet only when they meet 100% of the qualifications. So that's like a kickoff where you see people's eyes in the room open and that they're surprised. And again, I say, like, when you have 70% of the men who are in the superintendent's position making lots and lots of hiring decisions in the pipeline to leadership, that factor alone to get them thinking differently about how are they advertising job positions. So stop doing the bulleted list, right? So don't do like, you need to have these 10 qualifications or these 20 qualifications to apply for this job, because guess what? You'll have a woman who will meet 19% of those qualifications, but might self-select herself out because she doesn't meet all 20. So we've really been pushing and promoting, write a narrative, describe the type of leader that you want, and your applicant pool, just with that simple shift of write a narrative of the leader you're looking for, your applicant pool will significantly increase. You'll have a much richer applicant pool. And look, at the end of the day, we all want really good qualified people in leadership positions in education. Like, that's what it's all about. And we know there's a huge shortage of people who want to be superintendents. So you want to increase the applicant pool for any leadership position, start advertising it differently. It's my one quick takeaway for today.
That's awesome. It's like, it'd be a quick win for everybody.
Yeah.
And an easy change to make.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jazz. So guys, we're going to go and have a little bit of a conversation now with what you've heard so far and some questions you might have for Jazz. I'm going to share my screen again and we'll participate in a thought exchange. So what we have is a question for you, open-ended thought exchange question. What thoughts or questions do you have for Jazz? And you can participate and join the thought exchange two different ways. If you have a phone, a smartphone, you can hold the camera to the QR code and it will bring you straight into the thought exchange. If you do not have your phone with you or you want to, you can type into your browser thoughtexchange.com/join and you'll be prompted to add in the 9-digit code. So we are going to also have the link posted in the chat box of the Zoom chat by Amelia. And remember, you don't need to sign up for an account when you participate in this exchange. You can, that's optional. You just need to accept the terms of use to get into the thought exchange. Now, in order for us to participate fully in this conversation, we're going to enjoy a few moments of quiet. It might be awkward, silence, and I want to make sure that people have space to fully participate in the conversation. Well, I think we can jump into answering some of these questions here, and I'm just going to look at a couple of quick things. So we have our top thoughts. The thoughts show up from highest to lowest rated. You can see we've had a few thoughts rated 4.0. And one other area that sometimes I like to look at just real quickly to give us that 5,000-foot view of the conversation is, what did the machine learning come up with when it tried to take the thoughts added and automatically group them into themes? So we have some thoughts around projects, some detailed questions around the projects you're doing and kind of the time and some details. Do you want to jump in and answer, speak to any of these, Jazz?
Sure. You want me to start at the top, Rita, or just
Yeah,
any?
sure. How are you able to use Thought Exchange for professional development,
Yeah.
which is its own
So,
conversation for sure.
yeah. So using it for professional development, that's primarily the you know, complete way I'm using Thought Exchange for professional development. We probably will allocate anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half just on Thought Exchange. We put out our one thought. I gave an example earlier of, what issues or challenge are facing women in leadership that you would like to discuss that people don't rarely discuss. We've done things around effective communication. And then what we'll do is it'll populate the thoughts, and we'll either use it one of two ways. We will have an entire group discussion. So we'll have round tables. Every single group will start with the highest thought. They'll have some table discussions, and we'll do a report out. Or Thought Exchange will group people according to the topics that they want to talk about. And again, they'll get into those groups. They'll have discussions at their table. We'll have some report outs, and then we'll move on to the next thought. We find that the conversation is so rich that we probably only get through the top like 2, 3, maybe 4 thoughts in, by devoting, a good hour to hour and a half. It just really drives really great conversation.
I just wanted to double tap on the value of breaking people into smaller groups to do some of the work. It sounds like in both methods you do that with people. What's the value of having that small group work time?
Yeah, it gets people talking. Again, they see that they have shared ideas. It's not necessarily standing up in front of 100 or 200 people with a microphone saying, hey, this is what I think. They instantly see that they have this small group, a great place to share, new people to meet, new connections to make right away. And then, like I said, it's a little bit easier once you talk it over, hash it out, then we do a group share to the entire group.
I like that.
Yeah.
So the second question is a really practical one.
Yep.
How much time in advance are you running Thought Exchanges to prepare ahead of time for professional development?
Yeah, I'm doing anywhere from 3 to 5 days. We find that's kind of a good target. That way, if people are traveling in for a program, you give them a couple days in advance so they have a travel day, gives them a little time to think about it. And then we always do like a prompt reminder, maybe during breakfast or lunch at the program to say, hey, if you haven't gone in, please go in. And if you haven't gone back in to rate the thoughts, go back in and rate the thoughts. But we're not giving too much lead time on it, like, 5 days at the very most.
Okay, so keeping it close to the actual time frame, relevant to, people aren't going to forget about it. It's happening next week.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's 2 thoughts here. I'm just wondering, I really want you to talk about the bottom one.
The resistance.
Yeah, organizationally, this probably applies to a lot of people that are trying to do something that's disruptive in their workspace, and what that felt like for you.
So no one has ever voiced any resistance during our programs to using it. We always do a survey, and I think there may be some people who sit back and watch and see how it goes, but it seems like we'll get probably, I'd say, 80 to 90% participation rate. And so that tells me if you're capturing just about everybody, nobody's really resistant to it. We've also used it internally in some of our staff retreats, and we are a very small staff. We are 14 people, but we've used it for our own staff retreat on what do we want to work on internally, how can we grow, what areas should we explore, those types of things. And the conversation that's created internally, I think we've all grown as a team, like worked better, and it's had the same effect. Like, you don't have to just put something out on the table and say, oh my God, are people am I gonna get pushback for this? Are
Yeah.
people not gonna like it? You know, you just put it into the exchange, it's confidential. And, you know, if yours is the one that, you know, yours rises up to the top, you see, hey, I'm not alone in this thought. Like, people agree with me. People want to talk about this. And you don't feel like, hey, this crazy idea that I have, nobody else feels the same way. You actually feel just the opposite. Like, oh, other people agree with me. And it just creates that safe space to do that. And we, again, I think we've really grown as a staff and built ourselves as a team by putting those conversations in, creating that safe space, and then having conversation around it.
Oh, thanks so much, Jazz. Like, I heard you talk a little bit about, you know, you're using it primarily for professional development with, you know, external clients and partners you're supporting. And then the work you've done internally as a team maybe makes it a little bit easier to kind of support doing things a bit differently, like trying new technology, trying a new way of being vulnerable. Like, it's great. So we've got a category here called Speak Work Women. And
Okay.
machine learning always names everything. Never know what you're going to get. Okay.
So why is this work so important to me?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a long story. I'll try to condense it. So my mom was a teacher. I was born in the early 70s. I was born prematurely. I don't even think you know this story, Rita. My mom was about 28 weeks pregnant, and I weighed 2 pounds in the 70s.
Yeah.
And I've heard lots and lots of stories about how people didn't think I was going to make it. Babies that small generally didn't survive in the 70s. So lots of stories about that, and long hospital stays, and how everybody struggled through that. But then I heard my mom one day say, oh my God, I was so lucky I had you, you know, so early on in my pregnancy. You know, because I was a teacher, and if I was showing, like, if people could see that I was pregnant, I would have gotten fired and lost my job. And it just like really struck me. So the Pregnancy Discrimination Act came into effect in 1977. So I always had this idea that, yeah, my mom had to be a real advocate for women, and women were getting fired when they were pregnant, and that was kind of the age that she lived in, but it wasn't the age that I lived in. And it wasn't really till I was later on in my career that in this job, I started hearing stories from women that really, really spoke to me about how they were really being treated differently than the men, and really talking about the challenges that they faced. And I really took a good hard look at my own career and some of the choices that I've made with my own career and my family, and decided that, you know what, things really haven't changed all that much. And I have a space and a platform and ability to do this work and to make change, and as a membership organization to do better for our members. And also to, like I said, to fill that shortage. I was constantly hearing we have a shortage of people who want to be superintendents, shortage of people who want to be superintendents. And kind of those two worlds collided of, we have all these professional women, shortage of superintendents. And hearing those stories was like, hey, I've got an easy fix for this. Let's get more women into these positions. So, you know, it took me some time and some really, like, a good hard look at myself and some reflection that we really, I think, have a ways to go in achieving gender equity.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Like, yeah, I appreciate that. You're definitely the right person in the right place, in the right job. And thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rita.
Okay, we'll move over to favorite thought exchange yet. Well, I wonder what this one's going to be about. Ooh, these are both great questions, Jazz. Like,
Excited
you
about
know,
doing.
what's been your favorite?
Your favorite
Mm,
thought exchange, or what am I excited about doing? So let me take the what am I excited about doing. Um,
yeah.
like I said, the loneliness and isolation piece is relatively new for me in the last maybe couple of years.
Wow.
As I've started to talk about it a little bit and do some research, I've really drilled down and done a deep dive into it, and I've done more with that. So I'm excited to use Thought Exchange with that, again, to show people that I think all leaders at the top experience isolation and loneliness. They don't necessarily admit it, but if we can start getting people to be in those vulnerable spaces safely, and then how can we leverage that to improve the connections?
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to really make better connections, help people build their networks, and to help people share and support each other.
Yeah. That's awesome. And it makes me think about, especially in the education sphere, like, we're you're doing this work for children, right? And if
Yeah,
you can role
right.
model how to make connections in this complex world, help them do the same, right? Develop
Yep,
that resiliency. That's awesome.
yep.
Hmm. We've got a few more minutes. We can look into a few more themes. Things, employers, opportunities. Okay, what are we gonna get? Ooh, I like this one.
To make sure leadership. So there, I think to have succession plans for leadership positions.
Yeah.
One of the other things that's been eye-opening is people tend to not intentionally, but more naturally surround themselves with people who look like them, act like them, sound like them.
Yeah.
70% of our membership are men, and primarily white men. You can kind of see how that continues that legacy. So, really
Hmm.
making an effort to support, promote, sponsor people who don't look like you, don't sound like you, who think differently, and to get that diversity of thought. And especially when you are making hiring decisions and looking at your applicant pool, look to those people who are going to challenge you as a leader and have a different approach, a different perspective than you're going to have, and instantaneously you're going to create better leadership in a richer environment. I mean, we know statistically, we know there are all kinds of studies that say diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams every single time.
Right. So you're talking about disrupting the sorting that goes on that we all do when we surround ourselves by people that look like us and think like us and we feel comfortable it with, and to challenge those biases.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, which goes back to the example you gave us earlier about the writing the job qualifications differently even.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, here we go. Long people put.
Mhm.
What are we gonna get? There you go.
Oh, how long do you give people to put in feedback? All right, so this is one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm doing professional development and I'm using Thought Exchange, I create a playlist, a music playlist that is themed to whatever we are doing. So I have like a connection and collaboration playlist. I have a women's initiative playlist. And I will play my music to give people like something fun in the background. And, we let it populate. So if we're doing it live, I will give people 3 to 5 minutes which I don't, Rita, how long do you think we gave people here today?
Yeah, probably under 5 minutes, like maybe 4 minutes or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quick and easy. And then I said, if we're putting it out in advance, no more than 5 days, probably 3-4 days, we're giving people time. And then, you know, a quick reminder at the beginning of the program, hey, go in, put your thoughts in if you haven't already, rate. But it's pretty quick and easy. You don't have to give people a lot of time to really develop some great thoughts.
Huh. I love the playlist idea. It hits a challenge that sometimes I hear leaders have with being uncomfortable with the silence.
Yes.
And they either talk through it or
Right.
rush the process. Reminds me of like doing a Tabata workout or something. It's like, this is what you know you're gonna get. It's done, we're done.
Yeah, so my biggest challenge with professional development is I can be loud, but I don't have what people say that their loud teacher voice. Was never a teacher. So I have trouble when there's conversation going on, bringing people back together. So I say to people, okay, when you hear the music, that's also your cue to come back together. So I will click the music on theme to whatever we're doing, and I'll play my music, which is everybody's cue, like, okay, come back together, we're gonna do a report out. That's been a really fun way to use it too.
Yeah, I love it. That's cool. It's great to end on another, like a fun note too. So Jazz, we kind of asked you this in the thought exchange about what's coming up for you next, or what's something you're interested in doing. You touched base on digging into the loneliness work and working on connections. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else you want to add to kind of sum up the conversation today?
Yeah, I think just for everybody to know that, well, let me give everyone here a challenge, okay? Yeah. I just want to challenge everybody here, pick up the phone, text a colleague, call a colleague, hey, I'm thinking of you, can we chat, can we go to lunch, can we get coffee, can we get a drink, would love to talk to you, haven't heard from you in a while. Just if everybody could just do that really quickly, I bet you'd be really, really positively surprised by the response. When I get off this this video conference, I'm going to do that to a friend as well. Yep,
I can take you up on that challenge. It's like intentionally filling up our buckets and not staying isolated, right?
Yes.
Head down working. Yeah. Well, Jazz, thank you. It has been just felt so good to talk to you, and I think you answered a lot of questions for people and gave us a lot to think about going forward in our practice and how we work.
Yeah, thanks, Rita. Thanks for giving me the time. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. So anyone who is on the virtual event today that had questions about what you heard or were interested in Thought Exchange, you can reach out to my colleague, Amelia, and she can connect you in the right place. Ooh, there's dogs barking next door. And there's also, I think, a survey when you exit out of this. It'll ask you to provide your feedback on how you found this event went, and then also ideas for content for future virtual events. So thank you very much, and goodbye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.